Hello, everybody, and welcome to WTS 267. My name's Danny Murray.
And I'm Graham Merrigan.
How are you, Graham Mero Merrigan?
Excellent, buzzing, excited. It's the Wednesday before your wedding, and I cannot wait for the weekend.
It is.
I'm honoured and proud to be a groomsman.
I'm honoured and proud to have you as one. So long as you behave yourself.
Absolutely.
I don't want any repeat antics of the 2015 wedding we attended. Thank you very much. We'll say no more. Yeah, it's WTS pod, lads, and we're available everywhere, and hit subscribe and all that kind of thing. And our guest this week is a very, 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 very familiar friend of ours who is making his umpteenth appearance on the podcast. Our man in Stockholm, the wonderful Philip O'Connor.
Gentlemen, it's been a minute, as Danny said recently, and I was actually wondering when the call was going to come, and then all of a sudden it popped up. It's like, who's this Graham Merrigan inviting me on Zoom? He doesn't even text me anymore, Dan. He just sends you the Zoom invite going, here, arsehole, get in the fucking podcast, you know? But there's a real Joe Rogan vibe off that young fella at the moment.
He's got his Paul Howard whinging that he hasn't been on in ages.
Look, I am delighted to be here to share these last few days with Dan before he goes out there and makes an honest one of Oksana. I'm delighted for them both. I'm delighted that he's giving me. I personally wouldn't have had you within a mile of my nuptials, but there you go. But no, do you know what? It's great. It's a celebration of love. It's a celebration of love between you two, between them two, the love of Huskies, the love of life in general. So it's a great time to be on the show, lads.
I mean, have you any marital advice for him, Phil?
Just do the exact opposite of fucking everything I've done, right? I don't know how this woman downstairs hasn't fired me into the fucking sun, lads. But she hasn't. She's still here. And actually, Dan, in a couple of weeks' time, I'll be married 20 years, right?
Congratulations, Philip.
Thank you very much.
Congratulations.
I don't deserve congratulations. What I deserve is, how did you get away with that, right? I got married on the day that Ronaldinho lobbed David Seaman, and it was the happiest day of my life.
Unreal.
For so many reasons. And I mean, the day I got married, the bar, like in the hotel, was just full of paddies watching that, and the Swedes just could not understand. It's like, why are all these people going mad? These are English speakers going, no, 800 years, lads. And the next thing, the ball flies over Seaman's head and they're going demented. But what could have happened there, that was the World Cup in Japan and South Korea, back when Ireland used to be able to play football. We recently remembered after a period of amnesia, you know. But Ireland could have ended up playing on that day, lads, and I just don't know what I would have done. I think I probably just would have, had to cancel, because it was bad enough as it was. It was Midsummer's Eve here in Sweden, the longest night of the year. We had a fantastic time. And Dan, if you're even like 1% as happy as I have been with the wonderful woman I've married, you'll have the greatest life, a greater life than you could ever have imagined. So the best of luck to you both in the future.
Thank you very much. I do appreciate that. And we're looking forward to it. It'll be a bit of crack. Thankfully, sorry to interrupt you. As I just come on the show to fucking interrupt the pair, you right?
That's
why we asked you on, Phil, because you just talk for us, so we don't.
You're not sorry, and you'll do it again.
It's the easiest podcast of the year. But one of the things I would say, Dan, is like, and you'll be told this, and this is like, before you get a dog or before you have kids, people try to explain to you what it's like, and you don't realize it until you're in the middle of it, right? But from the moment you get up in the morning, enjoy the day, right? Because it is about the two of you, right? Let Graham worry about everything else. Let your best men, your groomsmen, let those fuckers worry about everything else. Let this be about you. Let this be a celebration of the two of you, right? When my wife walked into the church, we did it a little bit differently to the way the Swedish people would normally do it. Usually the two people would come into the church themselves, but her father came up the aisle. There was a little bit of a meeting across, the Catholic Protestant thing. It was like a really bad episode of Dirty Girls, and it just worked out, But so her father walked her up the aisle and that kind of thing, and I was standing there fucking petrified that something was going to go wrong, right? Mostly because on one side of the church was full of Irish people, and that's like putting cats in a bag. You just don't know what you're going to get of it, But everybody did manage to behave themselves. But when I watched the video back then, I'd entrusted a couple of people to make the video of it, and they sort of zoomed in on the minister. We got married by a Protestant minister, so I'm actually not really married at all. And they zoomed in on the minister's case, which had this like "I love judo" sticker on it. And
amazing.
That's part of my wedding videos. But look, that's the only thing that goes wrong. But take the time throughout the day, when you're cutting the cake, when you're at the ceremony, be with one another, because like these memories will last. As I say, I could talk about this for the next fucking 20 years, but have that. I really hope that you walk away with that, and that you get to share it with your family and friends there,
Thank you, man.
Mrs. O'Connor is a saint, isn't she?
She is, and she's probably, she'll fucking hate me talking about her. She's one of the most private people you'll ever meet. Like, you won't find photographs of her online or anything else like that. She doesn't, social media, she lurks and she stalks. She never engages and that kind of thing, Doesn't like me talking about her publicly at all. But I mean, every now and again, every Christmas, it's our birthday and that kind of thing, you have to give her the credit because she's a fantastic person. She's a fantastic woman. She's been a brilliant fucking person for me. Jeez, I don't know where I'd be if I didn't have her. And she's the mother to two fantastic children as well. So it's all ahead of you, Dan.
That's one of many Phil O'Connor monologues that will feature over the course of the next.
Absolutely is, and but a monologue that's got a lot of truth in it. More often than not, it is the matriarch of the family that is the glue that binds us all together. So,
absolutely. Phil, in that monologue, you mentioned about Ireland, the football team, and the memories of 20 years ago. Now, I don't want to talk about the memories 20 years ago, but I have noted when Ireland have played under Stephen Kenny, you are a fan.
Yeah, I'm a fan of ideas, Graham, right? I'm a fan of people who do things for a reason, right? And every conversation we've ever had on this podcast comes back to these things. It's not what you're doing, it's why you're doing it, right? And this is the thing that's impressed me with Stephen Kenny, where he has come from. This whole thing of, why does he take the job? Why did Trapattoni take the job? There's any amount of jobs out there. Yeah, but several million of Dennis O'Brien's money is probably part of it, right? But he's doing it for a reason, and he's doing it, I feel, for the right reasons. And I think about it sort of culturally and historically. If you talk to Eamon Dunphy about, basically street urchins playing ball in Drumcondra, which is himself and John Giles, Liam Brady, lads growing up that way, and even lads down in Cork and in Mayfield and in Galway and Sligo. And look, Sligo's a great football town. I'm sure you've been to an away game there yourself. It's a fantastic venue to see it. But we're going back to that. We're moving away from this idea, the elitism. We're moving back to the idea that, yes, if you're good enough, you can play for Ireland. It doesn't matter where you play there. And also the idea that football, as Danny Blanchflower says, it's not about going out and boring the other team to death. It's about panache. It's about winning things in style, And again, Bill Shankly saying that, it's much, winning is important in that kind of thing. But I think he said, so it wasn't life or death. It was much more important than that. And to me, it's very important not to win or lose. I don't care if Ireland ever win another game, but I want to see people go out there and try to make us proud by expressing themselves, not by boring the shite out of us and hoofing the ball out into the car park every opportunity we get. It's been unfortunate to see Ireland at Euro 2012, who were the first team mathematically knocked out of the group stage. The second team was Sweden because they were so totally fucking inept. And that was me gone after about 6 days, the fucking tournament. I had no interest in it after that because the two teams, one of which I was there to see, I was with the Swedes the whole time. But to see that, and this is an Ireland I can get behind. Stephen Kenny is behind a progressive and intelligent, a multicultural Ireland. It's a meritocracy. If you're good enough, you'll play. If you're not, you won't. It's a place where people are free to speak their mind and to take the consequences of speaking their mind as well. So it's become a team for adults in the room and for people who want to do things or want to achieve things together. And that's why I'm such a huge fan of Stephen Kenny. Now, if you pick Zach El-Bouzidi as well, then that's it. I'll do anything the man asks me. I'll fill the water bottles. I'll pump the balls, that kind of thing. So that's the only thing that's missing from his reign so far.
But the players that he seems to be given a chance as well. Not that previous players didn't feel like the younger players, the lads in their early 20s, the Gavin Bazunus of the squad, like little things like singing the national anthem in the lineup. You haven't really seen that over the years with the senior squad. But you're tending to see it more under Stephen Kenny. So I'm wondering if the players are more passionate, or is it the younger generation that are more passionate or proud, or it's not like the 90s as such where a lot of the starting 11 were Premier League players. They're now Championship players, League One players in England, even League of Ireland players, Jack Bourne, Graham Burke, Aaron McAniff. They've all been called up. Danny Mandroya, they've all been called up over the last 4 or 5 years.
Dan, did he only mention Rovers players there, or was that just me?
He did.
Oh, it's only Rovers players that get called up, although James Talbot got called up, in fairness.
There you go. No, I think.
But do you know what I mean?
Mandrew was made in Bows. Let's not forget.
That's very true. Yes, they're like hardened in the fire that is Bohemians Football Club on the north side, right? But I think I'd always be very wary, Graham, of saying that players from the past weren't passionate about it. Because
I didn't mean it like that. I just didn't articulate it properly.
Yeah, no, but I think that, they were passionate about it. But you have to look at the culture you create, right? As Danny will be well aware, a big NBA head that he is, right? The Boston Celtics just beat the Miami Heat to get into the NBA Finals for the first time since 2010, right? Which is a fantastic achievement. But the Miami Heat are a team that pride themselves on their culture, right? And you have a culture. Every team has a culture. Just most of them, their culture is shit, right? It's terrible. It's a negative thing. It's, cover my own back. Don't take responsibility. Do the bare minimum. Don't be the fellow who winds up on the back page for the wrong reason. And that's what we've had. Trapattoni's football was a risk-limiting football. Martin O'Neill's football was a risk-limiting football. And both managers at various points point the finger and say, well, what else are you going to do with these players, right? And that it creates a culture whereby fellas maybe don't look as interested. They don't look like they're willing to take the risks, right? With the obvious exception of James McLean, who just goes there, balls out in every game he ever played for Ireland. There's fellas there that, back in the 90s, the Irish national team, the Republic of Ireland soccer team was a shop window for fellas looking to go to Aston Villa, Manchester United, Liverpool, now it's no longer that. And it's actually, your stock could go down playing for Ireland under Trapattoni more so than there was a risk that it went up, as we've seen with players like Glenn Whelan, who had great careers, but, gradually they sort of fell out of the picture. And part of that was
Paul Green. Do you remember him?
Yeah. So, these are the obvious ones, but I think Kenny is the opposite. I think he sees it as a shop window for showing off everything that's great about Irish football. And the same thing has to be said for the women's team. They have been outstanding. Now, I have a lot of problems tactically and in terms of the group that Vera Powell and the way she runs things there. I don't think she's on the same level as Stephen Kenny just yet, but they're brilliant and they're finding their way through it. I don't think she's as far on her journey, let's say, as what Stephen Kenny is, but they're getting there. And this, to me, are two senior teams that are so worth our time and our love and our support. And from that, then, I would expect that the likes of Bazuna now is at Manchester City. I know he's been out on loan, etc., etc. Keegan Kelleher is at Liverpool. Okay, not getting a whole lot of games, but we're getting back to that. This is the first time in a while where the curve is starting to point upwards again. And part of that is due to the fact that, like, Zach El-Bouzidi wouldn't be playing for AIK in Stockholm if he hadn't been seen playing for Stephen Kenny's under 21s. Yeah. And I remember talking to Roland Nielsen. You can find the clip on YouTube, lads. So I talked to Roland, who was the under 21 manager when they met Stephen Kenny's team, when El-Bouzidi impressed. I remember saying to him, look, this is not a kick and rush team. Stephen Kenny's team is not a kick and rush team. And he was surprised and shocked. And now people are learning that. And I think these Nations League games are coming up over the couple of weeks of Danny's honeymoon are going to show people that this is a different Ireland. This is a new Ireland. And I think that this is the Ireland that we want everybody to see us as.
It's mad, right? Because I wanted to give Stephen Kenny time, right? But I think he had that run initially of, what was it, the first 7 games or something, 9 games, whatever it was, that no goal scored or whatever. And I was starting to lose faith. I was starting to go, there comes a fucking time, lads, where you have to kind of wonder, Yeah. I've never been happier to be wrong. I've been enjoying Ireland matches, and I went years where I just wouldn't bother with international football. I'd be like, look, I mean, if I'm flicking through the towns and I jump onto it, fair enough. But like, I wouldn't bother going to Lansdowne Road. I wouldn't bother seeking out an Ireland match as such. Whereas now, like you mentioned the Nations League, I think the Nations League is the greatest pile of shit ever. But at the same time, I know we're playing Ukraine. I know we're playing Scotland. I'm looking forward to these games.
Yeah.
If you had asked me 3 years ago, who are Ireland playing next week? Fucking wouldn't have had a breeze.
I like the Nations League.
I would ask you, was it a rugby match? Do you know what I mean? Like, honestly, that's, you know what I mean? Whereas now, and it is largely down to Stephen Kenny, it's not even a belief that will qualify for anything.
But
there's a belief that I'll enjoy watching it. And that is fucking more important.
I suppose that's what I meant. The way Danny has articulated there is what I meant, is that the players seem to be enjoying it. Anytime you hear the players at a press conference, they believe, even in that tough 9 games without a goal or whatever it may be, whatever it was, players were still, give us time. It's going to work out. Now, I never lost faith in the process, but I would have said to cynics, what's the alternative? The FAI is bankrupt. I mean, we don't have to
morally and financially.
Yeah, do you know what I mean? So Stephen Kenny in international management terms is probably on a modest enough contract, money wise in comparison to the industry and in comparison to what Martin O'Neill, Trapattoni and all that were on. So, I mean, anytime I asked what was the alternative, nobody could answer. Do you know what I mean?
I think there's a lot to be said.
It's like that. It's like the players have bought into it, and there's nothing better. There's no better feeling than representing your country.
Sorry, I was at a game. Sorry, Dan. I was at a game in Oslo early in Trapattoni's reign. I won't name the player because this was sort of off the record at the time. But I said to him, like, I was talking to him, I said, what was it like? You know, and it was, I don't know how many games in it was. We can go back and check the records. But he said, look, before the game, he told me, I don't give a shit if you don't even see the Norwegian goal, right? That's not what you're here for. You're here to make sure we don't concede. And this would have been a player that would have had an eye for a pass, you know, a fellow who might have been able to create something. But Trapattoni was literally telling him, I don't care about that. That's not how to impress me. The way to impress me is to stop them scoring, and that's it. And that to me, But it's also the very antithesis of sport, right? Because if sport is only about winning and losing, why? You know, what's the point of it, right? The whole point, and especially international sport, is to compare ourselves, to see how we stand in relation to others. And can you imagine getting a fellow who's on 20, 30, 50 grand a week in the Premier League and say, no, you're not allowed to express yourself. All that stuff you learned from Fairview Park and the Phoenix Park up to playing at Anfield and playing at, you know, the Stadium of Light and playing at the Emirates and that kind of thing. You're not allowed to do any of that here. Like, it just defeats the purpose. And when you have a manager like Kenny that comes in and says to a group of 30 or 40 players, maybe that he's used now, from Jack Byrne to, you know, Gavin Bazunu at the Premier League champions, and you say to them, I believe in you. I actually want you to do this. Now, Shane Duffy in the first couple of games, you know, you'd be sort of looking, you know, you were like the see no evil monkey going, fucking just hoof it, son. This is not working out. Well, when they settle into it, when you let footballers play football, it's, you know, winning actually matters less then, because I realized for years I thought I was a winner, lads. When I went out and played Gaelic football, I thought I was doing everything to win. I thought winning was the most important thing to me, and it was never important. It was never important in Gaelic football. It was never important to me in soccer. It was never important to me in basketball or in combat sports. What I actually wanted to do was I wanted to do something that would make people take notice. I wanted to make the pass that they didn't see or couldn't play themselves. That's what I wanted to do. And it took me a long time to realize that, because I went to school with it in Marino there, right? And when we played hurling, you know, they'd be hopping the hurleys off the wall, the teachers, and telling you were going to go out there and bait the shite out of lads. And that just becomes part of your psyche. But it didn't belong with me. It didn't sit well with me. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized, oh, no, I don't actually care. I want to win. Don't get me wrong. I was playing Gaelic football down there about a fucking month ago in Copenhagen. We lost all the games. And we won one game with a last minute goal, and it was just fucking awful. But that was because we didn't perform. It wasn't because we lost. If you were better than me on the day ground when we're playing basketball, or if you're better than me in a jiu-jitsu contest, Dan, that's fine. As long as I've done the absolute best that I can, as long as I've gone out there and gone out in my shield, I'm fine with that now. Now, maybe that's because I'm 50 as well. But when I take that to watching sport, that's literally what I want to see. I want to see Jason Tatum playing basketball. I want to see Steph Curry dropping 3-pointers that, you know, from just inside the halfway line. I want to see a knockout in the UFC or a submission in the UFC that I just couldn't pull off myself. That's the beauty. That's the real glory in sport. The rest, you can just put it under the Christmas tree.
It is. And I'll just say very quickly, you're looking very fresh and sprightly for 50, Phil. But I think what you're saying is 100% true, because even when you look at any sport, you look at any sporting situation at all, people tend to hate dominance. Anything that becomes the same old. People,
it's like Shamrock Rovers. That's why
everybody hates them because it's shite now. But it's, do you know, like, I mean,
it's shite now.
You know what I mean? But like the Alex Ferguson United team hated because we just kept winning. Now, in fairness, they were all right to watch most of the time.
Was that shite? Was it?
But like,
was that shite for you?
No, but hang on. But as a United fan, it was a bit dull.
Would you?
No, it was right, but it's the same. Look at any sport. You're only as good as your rival in terms of the entertainment value.
Do you know what?
Old Trafford became the library. Remember, it was the theatre of dreams, because
of course you want good competitive rivalry, but at the same time, like, you're not gonna be going mad if your team is winning all the time.
No, you're not. But at the same time, what I'm saying though is that, yeah, success is great. Don't get me wrong. But,
so did you get bored during the Fergie years?
Yeah, sure, Graham. I went to rugby
because it was.
Football was shy for me. Football was like, it was grand. I'd watch it, but let's be honest. For years, how many times did me and you have a chat where you'd say one sport that matters, and I'd be like, yeah, rugby. Do you know what I mean?
I didn't know you went to rugby because the Fergie years bored you. Because
it wasn't. Now, in fairness, it wasn't just the Fergie years that bored me. It was football in general. I was like, this isn't for me anymore. I was just falling out.
And now you've left rugby for basketball.
Yeah, well, this is it now. Basically, I will hop on whatever bandwagon is going.
Yeah, but like, exactly.
No, but what, right? So, but like, I haven't renewed my season ticket with Leinster in about 4 years. Actually, since I moved to Laois. When I moved to Laois, I had the remainder of the season on my Leinster season ticket. But have I gone back since? No, but the pandemic probably played a little bit of a part in that as well. But the point I'm making is that any sport, you look at Formula One even, everybody hated Mercedes and Lewis Hamilton because all that was happening every season was, oh, here we fucking go again. And it was great when Nico Rosberg beat Hamilton, but it was still Mercedes. Last year, Max Verstappen comes along and now Formula One, everybody's buzzing for it because suddenly, we've got Ferrari back. Look at basketball, Phil. The Boston Celtics needed the LA Lakers. Larry Bird needed Magic Johnson.
100%.
You know what I mean? You need these things to happen. And if you're just going out there and dominating, what's the value for people? You can't bring in new fans.
There's a process involved in getting to that level. So with Shamrock Rovers, they've won the league last year, they won the league the season before, and they won the FAI Cup the season before that. That was the process.
Let me ask you a question.
Stephen Bradley's been in charge for 6 years. We haven't won the league 6 times. It's a process to get there, and your win, lose, or draw.
But I think if you look,
we lost against Drogheda last week, and I was there in Drogheda, and it was miserable. Yeah. So I'm not buying into this at all.
But if you look at that's one thing. I'm kind of only half joking when I said that about Shamrock Rovers, right? But if you look at PSG winning the league, the men's league in France forever, Juventus 9 titles in a row, Barcelona, Real Madrid, Celtic, Rangers. It does. Danny's exactly right. When there's no jeopardy in it, it's like that thing of what happens? Yeah, well, they play for 120 minutes and then the Germans win on penalties. One of the best things that I saw recently was the Women's Champions League final, which was a week before the men. Right?
I watched it, yeah.
Yeah, so you saw the game, right? So Oda Hegerberg comes back for Olympic Lyon. She had been out with a knee injury almost a year and a half. And in that time, Barcelona created this unbelievable team, right? It was just impossible to beat them. They only lost once all season. And that was the semi-final second leg to Wolfsburg of Germany, right? And they still made the final because they were already through. And then they came out and Lyon took them apart. The first half of that game, Graham, was, I don't know if you agree.
I was looking at the betting, Phil. I was looking at the betting, and I love doing a bet, the result in both teams to score, right? And Lyon were 22-1, and I was like, oh, jeez, I won't touch that because Barca are firm favourites here. And then I went out to the dog, came back in, and was fucking 3-1 or something.
Yeah. And Lyon just tore them apart in the first half an hour, And that was and even afterwards, I actually tipped Barcelona to win that game as well. And I should have known better. And there's a few people around Hegerberg who were saying, you should have known better, because that's just what she does in these big. She's the top scorer in the whole competition. But those two now have created that kind of Celtics Lakers in the 80s rivalry, right? And that's jeopardy. But I've always said the greatest thing that's happened in recent years in English football is Liverpool being back at the top, right? Because I found it really boring because Manchester United were so dominant for so long and Liverpool were so terrible for so long. And you'd have, Chelsea and Manchester City. I have a hard time respecting those clubs because any club can do that, as Newcastle will next year with a huge amount of money. But when you build it now, I know Liverpool has spent millions as well, right? But every club is doing that now. But when Liverpool come in and they're contesting Manchester United, Arsenal, it just makes for a more enjoyable spectacle. But for years there, as Dan says, and the same thing, it was Ron O'Gara winning the European Cup there with La Rochelle against Leinster over the weekend. A great thing for rugby. Now, Leinster.
For Leinster. Yeah, absolutely. I was miserable watching it, but at the same time, I had to tip my hat and say, La Rochelle, 2 finals in a row. They lost the first one. They came back. There is romance in sports. There's no place for it, but it's there. And every so often, you have to let it go. It's just.
I hadn't heard of La Rochelle till Sunday morning. I thought it was a champagne.
I thought it was a fucking chocolate. I didn't know. Seriously, I thought, who are these people wanting to be up? But what Dan, just going back to what Dan was saying about the romance in sport, right? I've said it to you both a couple of times. During the pandemic, I went back to reading books about boxing and baseball because some of the greatest writing about any sport is to do with boxing and baseball. And there's a guy called Roger Angel who just died there, an American man, and he used to write for the New Yorker. He wrote about many subjects. When he wrote about baseball, it doesn't matter that we don't know it, that we didn't grow up with it, we didn't understand. It's just poetry, And that to me is, there's so much sport and there's so little romance. There's so few of those moments, when of Usain Bolt, less than 10 seconds to win an Olympic medal. His entire Olympic career could be measured in a couple of minutes, basically, But when you find those moments, I was watching a broadcast the other night where they were talking about Michael Jordan scoring 63 on the Celtics in the playoffs in 1986. It doesn't matter that he lost the game. It was one of the greatest performances ever. And that's what we look back on. We'll look back on this Real Madrid team that beat Liverpool will wonder why Liverpool can't score in a cup final. And we look back at, Swedes always talk about the forehead, and some people have a forehead that's made of iron, and some people, they say, have one that's made of ice cream, right? And that Liverpool team, because they don't have any resilience whatsoever, so they would say their forehead is made of ice cream. And that's the thing, that's why we keep turning it on. If everybody's going to win every week, the viewing figures drop off, the interest drops off, which is why there's certain sports I don't watch.
The NBA playoffs are a great example of that, because now we've got a situation where the Celtics, as you said, first time in the final in years, Golden State Warriors, first time in the final in years. And last year, I honestly thought the Phoenix Suns were going to take some beating this year. Mm-hmm. They just looked like they were on a tear. Just did not see them crashing out the way they did. The Bucks probably didn't have a great season. They kind of, after winning it last year, they kind of went from side to side, meandered their way into it. They came up against the Celtics team that just is clicking at the right time. Now, I would have loved to see Luka Doncic. I want Luka to get a chip. I just do. I love the guy.
All in time.
But at the same time, Celtics Warriors it's a final that I'm like, I didn't see this coming, but I'm fucking happy this is happening.
That's the thing. My alarms are set for every day. It starts now on Thursday night. So by the time this podcast comes out,
so they play best of 7, is it?
Yeah, it's best of 7. So first team.
When's game 1?
Game 1 is on Thursday night. So I think this podcast usually comes out on a Saturday morning. So it'll
come out on Thursday this week, because I've jobs to do, I've been told.
Okay. Oh, that's right. Yeah. I can just imagine Danny sitting there going, "No, Pet, I know the car's outside. I have to get the podcast out." Graham will go nuts, So, okay. So that game will be coming out this evening, right? Or the first game will be on this evening. But that's fascinating, because of the way the Celtics have become a real team, right? They've gone from a team of individuals to being a team where no one part is more important than the rest. And that has been a very hard road for this team, right? Because team sports has become so individual. Like I usually say that, professional soccer at the highest level in the Champions League, the Premier League, is no longer a team game. It's 11 individuals fighting for the right to be millionaires. And that's just how it works, right? There was a guy, Mikey Collins, a young lad from Tala. I think his father or his uncle is an agent who took a lot of those young lads from sort of Dublin Southwest there over to Manchester City and that. Good, nice families. And Mikey was telling me at one point there was 50 pros on the books at Liverpool, right? So just to get into the reserve team on a Wednesday, never mind the fucking A team, right? You have 49 lads ahead of you when you arrive over on the boat, right? Yeah. So that means you're way out, and they're killing each other in training every day. And it doesn't matter who you are, like they're going at it every single day. So the Boston Celtics, the guys are there. I have fairly good connections with the club. I've been privileged enough to see them play in the Boston Garden. I've seen playoff basketball there, which for a fella from the north side who grew up watching Larry Bird, it doesn't get any fucking better, But I've been there when they were playing against the Cleveland Cavaliers and LeBron and that. And that was the problem at the time, was there were each individual was like, their own little satellite, right? And the coaches come in. A first-year coach called Ime Udoka came in and went, "I don't care who you fuckers are, right? You're passing the ball, right? And if passing the ball is the right thing to do, I'm going to start calling him the American Stephen Kenny, right? Because if passing the ball is the right thing to do, they do it. And if they don't do it, they're right out of there, and he's brilliant. If you make a mistake, it's like, I told you not to do that. Go sit at the end of the fucking bench and I might come and get you for the next game, And that holding people accountable as well, because at the end of the day, I kind of joked about, being individualists and being millionaires and that kind of thing. But the ability, to put everything aside and to do what's best for the team is probably the most treasured value in all of sports. It's that sense of humility, because that's what team sports is. It's about, you putting yourself at the mercy of the team and saying, well, I might have to take this charge. I might have to, go up against this guy. I might have Janice dunking a ball in my face. I could be on a poster in every bedroom in America because of what it does here. But this is the right play to make right now, And that's the rarefied air. I mean, there's only 450 odd pros in the NBA, right? That's a tiny percentage of the American population, let alone the global population that could play. Oh, Dan, did you see the other day, by the way, in my Insta story, I met Enes Kanter at the airport in Stockholm.
No, I didn't.
So Enes is a Turkish basketball player, Graham, and he played for the Celtics for a little while, and then he was let go during the season and sent away. But he was over. His name is actually Enes Freedom. He changed his name to Enes Freedom. But his father is also. Yeah, so his father would be, one of the people being persecuted by Erdogan in Turkey. They took away Enes's passport and the whole. How the fuck he got to Stockholm? I've no idea if he's no passport. But I met him at like 8 o'clock the other morning. But I digress. There's only like a few hundred players who ever get to do this, and to see these guys operate at that level, but also to see the struggle that they have to put themselves. And there's parallels to be drawn in all of society. Where okay, what's best for me? What's best for us? And that whole thing of what's best for us almost always has to come what's best for just me and me alone, apart from on Saturday, Dan. Remember what I said?
Come here, Phil. Am I right in saying that the NBA teams have wheelchair basketball teams as well?
There are some with wheelchair basketball teams. It's one of those things that they're trying to get the WNBA up and going, and they're trying to get wheelchair basketball up and going. It's never really taken off, but I think we're living in a time now, Graham, where that's going to get going. We're seeing an awful lot more in the terms of Paralympics and the coverage that people are getting. I think we're living in a great time for women's sport and for Paralympic sport, which has been criminally ignored for so long, you know. And you were saying as well that the European Championships is coming up in Bosnia, yeah?
That's right. That's a good segue, Phil.
When does that kick off?
He's doing my job for me.
It's all right, Dan. You're off this week. Oksana has things for you to do.
We're getting married, Dan. As I don't know if Danny, I don't know if I ever discussed that on the pod, but
we've been saving it for a special episode, Graham. And sure, no time like the present, given we're going on holiday.
Back in January, I was appointed assistant coach of the Irish wheelchair basketball team. So, we are headed. Our last training session is this Saturday. And we are headed to Sarajevo on Sunday, June 12th. The tournament kicks off on Wednesday, the 15th of June. We were drawn in a group with Serbia, Slovenia, and Latvia. So our first game is on Wednesday, the 15th of June, 1 o'clock. I think that may be 12 o'clock Irish time against Serbia. We owe Serbia a beating because they beat us by 9 points at the last Euros. We play on Thursday, the 16th of June against Latvia at 4 o'clock. And we play on Friday, the 17th of June against Slovenia at 3:30. And hoping to top the group and get out of the group. It's a mixture of wheelchair basketball in Europe is done division-wise. Based on your standards. So there's A, B, C, D. We're currently in C, and we're looking to be promoted to potentially A because it's a joint tournament due to the pandemic of Division B and C. So Division B would be the likes of Belgium, Portugal, and stuff like that. So it's going to be on YouTube. All the matches will be live on YouTube. So I'll be posting them up all on my socials. I'll be ramping up some media attention. So if both of you can get involved in the sharing,
absolutely,
that would be much appreciated.
We'll be shared and absolutely everywhere, Graham. And
I'll be sharing it like it was monkeypox, Graham. Honestly, but the other thing is that's a real group of death right there, because basketball is like a religion in Latvia and in Serbia and in Slovenia. You know, so you can imagine. But I mean, you know, going in there with an Irish team, we have an experienced assistant coach like our good self going in there. How, like, if I can ask you a question, I know, Jesus, I'm supposed to be the one answering the questions here, but how tactical is the game at that level? Or, you know, is it down to having the best individual players, or when you're going out there, can you sort of put together tactical plans to contain their best players and to make the most of yours?
It's very tactical. And in actual fact, last Saturday, you know, it was last Saturday and the Saturday before was probably the kind of first two Saturdays where me and the head coach, Villy and Ryan, were where we were kind of like the pennies dropping, you know, with the tactics that we're trying to adapt. So yeah, the question about tactics, it is very much against tactics. We have come up with tactics where we think we can do really well in this tournament. Wheelchair basketball, as both of you are well aware, is done classification wise. So, you know, you're allowed 14 points on court, and you might have a 4.5 classification player, which he would be quite tall in his chair, and you would have a couple of 1.5ers. Now, I'm the assistant coach. I'm not playing in this, but when I'm playing in the National League, I'm a 1.5. So it would be my job to either try and get the big guys in, or depending on the opposition, like we have kind of strategized for the tournament, we're looking to actually get the 1.5ers in without giving too much away. But yeah, we're looking to attack the elbow to get a lot of movement down the base.
Just Graham, I'll just stop you here. Like, we had 37 downloads in Latvia last week. I don't want to put me. I don't want to put the fear in you.
Basketball Association.
I don't want to put the fear. But Riga is a hotspot, so just be careful.
So yeah, our tactics will be looking for the 1.5ers to attack the elbow, to swing the ball, to, you know, constantly move it in the 24, and yeah, we're hoping to do really well.
It sounds like it's going to be a fascinating watch because, like, to go out there and to live and die by such, sort of slashing towards the basket and trying to create space. There's an awful lot of teams, like back in the 70s and back in the 80s, it literally was, get that ball in there to the big fella and just hope that he's fucking bigger than everybody else. And
yeah, well, we're hoping for our big fellas just to get the rebounds, to be honest.
Yeah.
In our phase one, we've a couple of phases, but phase one, the priority would be for the 1.5ers to take the shoot, or if we can create space at the top of the key, depending on the opposition. Latvia are quite a small team, so we could be driving against them and creating space. But as you said, Phil, creating space in wheelchair sports or wheelchair basketball, it's easy to do on the training court, but when you have to apply that in a match, Danny, you've been to loads of Bulls matches. You actually over the years, the rules now, and what we're trying to do at a club level. So I
just can't wait for it. I just can't wait to see it lumped up top when it's a close game, 2 minutes to go, and a few sky hooks being thrown in there from the tall lad.
Yeah,
who's your cream?
Forget all that other shit I said. Just put it in that fucking basket, lads.
We played a few friendlies with the 23s over the last couple of weeks, and we have 2 friendlies this Saturday with them as well, because they're heading off to the Paralympic Youth Games in Helsinki a week later. But there's been matches where the last couple of seconds there has been hook shots from the halfway line. have sunk.
Is it a case as well? Like, I mean, because obviously, look, the pandemic put fucking everything on hold. But did wheelchair sports particularly suffer? Because these international tournaments, I mean, is it funding hard enough to get anyway? And then you throw this into the mix and trying to get everything back up and running. Has it been tougher than you'd expected, or?
Well, there's pros and cons to that in terms of the pandemic. The cons being that the international tournaments did just come to a standstill. The pros for us and this squad of players is that, unfortunately, due to lack of funding, I've represented Ireland a couple of times where it's come out of my own pocket, or the company, my employer, has sponsored me for that trip. So we do have to pay for our trips. But because of the international tournaments coming to a standstill in the pandemic, there is kind of backdated funding left over that needs to be spent. So the players will need to pay to represent their country, but it won't be what they had paid in previous years and previous tournaments. It'll be significantly lesser than what they had to pay previously, which is good. But a lot of people that are not wide to that, Joe Soap generally is horrified that our squad of players and the under 23s, when they head off a week later, have to pay to represent their country. But we are where we are.
Well, we kind of have a similar situation in Nordic GAA. Like our nearest game is our nearest challenge match might be 2 hours up the road on a Saturday morning, so there's always an expense involved there, and you do it because you love it. But when you're representing Ireland, Graham, we're one of the richest countries in the world, right? Per capita, it's not like the money isn't there. And you'd love to see a situation where we go back to when Steph Roach and Louise Quinn and Emma Byrne and everybody was coming out and saying to the FAI, look, just fucking treat us decently, put us up in a decent hotel, give us a fucking tracksuit we can keep, And the same thing for Paralympians and for Paralympic sports. Like, okay, I don't want the lads being paid, for every week of the year, that kind of thing. But when it comes to this, if it costs 20 grand, if it costs 30 grand, if it costs 50 grand, seriously, that money has to be found somewhere. For major tournaments like World Championships or European Championships, it's not a big ask. And I do think that
it's not a big ask at all, you're right.
No, but I do think that, somebody in your position who's battled so hard for so long, just for the crumbs from the table, we need to look at getting you the whole slice. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. It shouldn't be a situation where you should be going cap in hand and saying, look, I have this great bunch of lads. We're going over there. There's a couple of coaches, that kind of thing. Like, it should be a given that,
But even look at the boxing, Phil. We've got a middleweight European champion in Gabriel Dawson, and his funding was cut.
Oh, but this is the thing, and again, I don't want to take the focus off wheelchair basketball at all, but just the way we do things. If we go back to where we started this conversation, you're representing me. You and your players are going to represent me, right? It sounds to me like you're going to try to play the kind of creative, aggressive basketball that I grew up watching, that I love, and that I see the Celtics playing, and that I want to see the Irish wheelchair basketball. Fucking pay for it. I'll give you money towards it, right? But really, our state needs to be behind it, because these are the people you're creating stories, you're creating heroes, you're creating icons, right? We're doing the same thing in boxing, we're doing the same thing in football. We put so much money into these things, and like I say, you're not asking for much. Why is it so hard for us to divert the little few bob that you need in the grand scheme of things? Again, it goes back to that question of what do we prioritize? And I'd much rather prioritize you and your lads and the boxers and the next Katie Taylors of this world than, oh look, here's another skyscraper, or oh, shall we build another fucking hotel?
Yeah.
Parity is something that doesn't come easy in Ireland. It just doesn't,
No.
And
parity or parody?
Well, no, parody comes far too easy. That's the problem. But parity of esteem, particularly, is
who was it who said that as soon as you start to watch Father Ted and realize it's a documentary, your life will change.
But it is. But Mero, yeah. So Irish wheelchair basketball team representing the Europe. You're representing the whole country in the European Championships. June 12th, 15th,
16th, and 17th, isn't it?
15, 16, 17 are the group games, and then the games. I don't know who gets who until after we see how the groups go and group out Division B. But it's Division B and Division C together. It's usually only Division C together, Division B together, Division A together. There is potential in this tournament to qualify and to get promoted to Division A.
Brilliant.
And I think the Division A European Championships are in this December. So we are going also to an invitational tournament in Barcelona in September, which is all paid for by the organisers in Barcelona. So
brilliant. And the European Championships will be streamed live on YouTube. Keep an eye on Mero social media, on What's Story social media. All the social medias will be shared
on Phil's social media and Danny's social media.
Absolutely, it will. Phil, to move things along slightly, and a story, if we can try and be topical, lads. A story that has taken social media by storm. What is Swedengate, and what are you doing? What's going on?
I never even heard of this.
It's strap yourself in, Mero. You're gonna love this, right? So what happened was somebody started a thread on Reddit and asked the question, sort of, I think it was to do with play dates or something like that. What's the weirdest shit that ever happened, right? So somebody went on to Reddit then, and they said, well, I went to play with my mate as a kid, and we're playing away in the kid's room, and then their mother came up and said, it's time for your dinner, and the other kid says to this kid, wait there, I'll be right back. So the kid went downstairs, ate their dinner, and came back up. Now, the kid who was left in the room, I think was from some sort of immigrant background, was going, what the fuck just happened there, right? Why wasn't I asked to go down, but, break bread with the family, that kind of thing? Because no, that doesn't happen in Sweden, right? So this was posted on Reddit, and the whole world lost its shit, right? It culminated in a woman over here in Sweden called Lovette Jallow. From the name, I can guess that somewhere around Gambia or somewhere like that she comes from, right? So she went and she started a Twitter space about all these things that Swedish people do, these weird little sort of crazy things, like, if you go to a party, like if you're having a party now on Friday night, Dan, right? Just before everybody's getting together, that kind of thing, right? And, all the booze is there, and you go, oh, hang on, sorry, that's my bottle of wine there. So no, you can't have any of that, right? So you just hold on to that, and everybody be looking at you going, are you out of your fucking mind, son? But pour us a glass there and get done with it. Well, no. If you go to a party with Swedish people, they literally stand there holding the thing. They won't even put their beers in the fridge because they're so afraid that somebody's going to rob it on them, right? So all of these things, and it culminated in Lovette starting a Twitter space, which is where you go on. It's kind of like Clubhouse was supposed to be before it fell off the face of the earth, right? And like she had people on sharing these experiences, and a lot of them were rooted in racism. A lot of them were rooted in these major cultural misunderstandings. And the Twitter space went on for 5 hours and 34 minutes of people just telling these stories, right? One after the other, right? And basically the whole world looked at that and going, is Sweden too miserable to feed a child? Is Sweden too miserable to put a bit of meat and 2 veg in front of? And the country just lost its shit, right? So people here, I mean, my missus was saying the same thing would have happened to her. She was in her mate Sarah's gaff every day, and now she's an oddball at times to begin with, but she's going, no, I never thought that was weird at all, right? So it does have cultural roots, right? So it might be that, my kids go out and they eat and that kind of thing. and they've, I planned a dinner at home, and then my kid comes home and goes, I'm not hungry. Well, this food is going to go to waste, and the Swedes would say, that's not right. You shouldn't impose on other people. You shouldn't go into somebody else's house with an expectation that they're going to feed you, right? But when you live in the area I live in, and when you know the people that I know around here, right, it's about 50% Swedish people. My neighbors at this wall pointing away from me, they're from Turkey. My neighbors on the other side are from Iran. There's people from everywhere here. There's people from Luleå on the far north of Sweden. There's people from Finland and from Norway and from, everywhere here, right? But if I go into their houses, like, I will literally come home twice my original size, right? I look like Elvis in Vegas because they'll feed you that well. And if you don't eat, you're the worst in the world. A mate of mine is from Eritrea. He's married to a Kurdish girl, right? And he used to play professional football, and I needed to interview him for a documentary. And there was only one time I could do it. His in-laws live, about 10 minutes away, 5 minutes away in the car. I said, I'm at my mother-in-law's now. Can you come over and do this thing? And I rushed into the house, and it was literally 5 minutes of an interview for a radio documentary I was making. And I made the radio documentary, and I was leaving. And it was a Sunday night, lads. It must have been 8 or 9 o'clock. And I was leaving, and his mother-in-law stopped me and just stood in the doorway like this. I just gone, but you haven't eaten anything. Will you have a cup of tea? I was going, no, missus, I'm really sorry, but I have to go. And she let me out, and she went, this has never happened before. I don't know what to do. Like, I have to give you something. I can't have you leave me house without eating. So that's, it's this huge sort of cultural clash. But everything has come into it then, lads. The whole thing of going to parties and alcohol and this kind of thing. And they are odd people, and there's a sort of a strong individual streak in them.
The initial story isn't exclusive to Sweden, though. I remember growing up, and when I grew up and in my grandparents' house, and the next door neighbours, the man was an Irishman, the wife was a French woman, and I used to love going in there and playing in the morning up until lunch, because she was it was the first house that ever had Nutella, and in the summer she'd always make pancakes and Nutella, and there was always like, here's a few pancakes for Graham. Now I went to if you went to a different family on the street or around the back or whatever, there was a case of you'd be playing video games in the back room, and they'd be called for their lunch in the summer, and you'd be in there playing video games until they come back out for their lunch. So I don't think it's exclusive to Sweden.
Absolutely, it's not. Now, there is a whole thing, don't get me wrong, with that. Like Phil said, you break bread and whatever, and people do that. It's a way of welcoming people in and saying, like, what I have, you have, this kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
But then I can remember as a kid, certainly, where you'd be in a friend's house, like you said, you're playing video games or you watching whatever or something like that, and they get called and they go outside into the kitchen or whatever, they'd have a bite to eat, but you and the other lads would just be kind of sitting there. And we grew up in the 90s in Dublin, in Ballybrack, where a lot of people didn't have. So if there was 3 extra mouths in the house, all of a sudden they were like,
exactly.
Back to your own house for the Goodfellas pizza, lads. It's not in here. You'll be getting that.
I think it's one of the differences, though, Dan, is that, right, like, you're talking about something much more formal than you wouldn't turn up at somebody's door the way we would do in Ballybrack or Donecarney, right? Where all of a sudden, there's a parade of mates going through your hall, and then all of a sudden there's no expectation of catering in that situation, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
But if my kid is like 6, they're fucking 17 and 15 now, play dates are a thing of the past here. But if you were to say to them, right, can my friend come over? Absolutely, right? So if you're inviting them into your house, it's a different thing, right?
Yeah,
now, the other thing that they're absolute bastards.
Play dates are different. I get that.
Yeah, so that's it. But that would be one of those things where they're not expected, right? But the one thing that drove me mad here, like, I remember being here, it was probably 1995, I think, when I was here the first time. And I went to a pub, right? Didn't have a whole lot of money. And then, Sweden was an extremely expensive country for gargle, that kind of thing. So we went out in this town called Norrtälje, which is 70 kilometers north of Stolkholm.
Mero just had that in his pancakes.
Far more tasty than this place as well, I can tell you, right? But we went out, and there's this pub called The Corner. We went down there, and I got the first round in. And they just automatically assumed, oh, this is the nicest man in the world. And I thought, well, obviously we're in a round here. I had no understanding of the concept, lads. And I'm sitting there down about 30 quid. 30 quid in 1995 was probably about a third of my week's wages, I'd say, And you're sitting there going, okay, is anybody else getting money? And nobody's moving, It's like, oh, fuck, So I very quickly learned that that's not a thing, There has been, like, if you're sitting with people and they're having dinner, right, down to the last crown, it's happened to me in so many places where somebody would say, oh, you owe this, or you had that, or, this, and you're thinking, lads, just fucking split the thing 10 ways or 6 ways or whatever, And sometimes, like, you go out for lunch or whatever. And we were playing a football match one night, right? And there's one of the lads, Boyan Georgic, you'll see him on MUTV on occasion. He used to play for Manchester United, nicest fella in the world. And after the game, he says to everybody, he says, okay, I'm driving back to Shista. His parents live here near me. He says, does anybody need a lift home? And they said, well, where are you going? He said, well, where do you fucking live? I said, because, if it was a Swedish person, they wouldn't give you a lift home. They'd give you a lift to their place, and then you could just fucking fend for yourself, Whereas if you were giving Mero a lift home, Dan, you drop to his door kind of thing, rather than just go to your gaff.
Absolutely, yeah. Kiss him on the forehead, good night, and the works.
Yeah, exactly. But instead of just going to your gaff and go, all right, Graham, fuck off, you're on your own now, So it's those weird things that, nobody depends on anybody else, and therefore you can't expect anything of them. Like a lot of people here, we've talked about COVID and that kind of thing a lot, right? And there would be the expectation here where, like, my mother-in-law and father-in-law, if you heard that they were very ill or anything as like that, I'd be going, okay, what can we do for them? Do they want to move in here or whatever? Do we have there's none of that here whatsoever, right? There's like, they're on their own now. We've moved out. They can look after themselves, And I've always found that I grew up in a house with my mother's mother. Didn't get along particularly well with her, but we grew up. That was just the way it was, lads. And you couldn't ever imagine a situation where anybody would just be left to fend for themselves if they were ill or that kind of thing. But, there is that sort of individualist streak that, once you're 18, like, I joke about it with my kids, like the day you're 18, I'm driving you to IKEA and then to your new home. And then that's the fucking end of this. All obligations stop there, and I think they're probably happy enough of that after living with me for the guts of 20 years,
But it's, and just you mentioned, I say his name wrong because my knowledge of him is from Football Manager many moons ago. Bojan Djordjic, is it?
But Bojan Djordjic,
yeah, Football Manager, Championship Manager as it was back then, absolute legend in that game.
You still play that, Danny?
I haven't bought it in the last, I'd say maybe 2 or 3 years ago was the last.
You played it up to 2 years ago.
Yeah, and I'd play it again if I had time, Graham. Just you have to dedicate time to that game.
If I lived in Laois, I wouldn't fucking do anything else. I wouldn't go inside the door.
That's it, man.
But I have to give Bojan credit, right? He moved to Manchester United about the same time as I moved over here. And his father, Ranko, used to play for Red Star Belgrade, and his mother lived around the corner from me. And they're just the nicest people, And when you see Bojan on TV or whatever, he comes across as a, little bit of a sort of a hard man kind of a thing, but he's just the best character. He's been in this house countless times. He's just such a fantastic bloke. And it doesn't matter what you need. I probably haven't seen him in person for a year. But if I pick up that phone, if I pick it up now, he's in Ljubljana on holidays or something like that. But if you were to pick up the phone and ask him for anything, he'd be at your door in 5 minutes. He's just the most genuine, decent fella. Doesn't matter. Brilliant career. Played for Rangers. Phil. I don't even know if I'm as trustworthy as this fella is, but just, like the three of us, he's just full of love for his fellow man. There's nothing he couldn't do for you. And just the world, it just needs more people like him. And you know what, lads, actually, one of the things he really should get more credit for, when he came back, he sort of never officially retired from football. He just sort of, he just slid out of the game a little bit. He played the first season of the Indian Super League. Marco Materazzi, who used to play for Inter, was the manager, played against Del Piero the whole lot. One morning he came down, like we had this sort of pickup power league team. He said, I'm going to India and I need to play games. I said, you want to play fucking games with me? Are you out of your mind? I said, yeah, I can't get insurance to play anywhere else, so I'm going to have to play. So he came down on Sunday morning. I said, okay, you can do this, but you have to understand that this level is an awful lot lower, And the next thing, he's knocking these long balls for me and he's looking at me going, why don't you run? It's because I'm not Andy fucking Cole, boy. It's like, that's right. Scale it back just a little bit, But once he came back, then he started to coach teams here, and he didn't coach teams in the Allsvenskan, the top division, or the Superettan. He came down to Division 7, Division 6, Division 5, and to this day he's still involved. And he goes around talking to young fellas and being a part of the community. He doesn't have to do this, Like, he does it because he wants to offer fellas the opportunity. He wants to offer them a bridge into, polite society and say, look, if you want to make it as a footballer, you want to be a pro footballer, this is my experience. He'll admit now that, some of the decisions he made at United and that kind of thing weren't the best, but he's always there for people. And really, as I say, I want him to know, he does know how much I love him, but I want everybody else to know how much he deserves to be loved because he's such a fucking great bloke,
Yeah, he's football Championship Manager as it was, legend himself, and Javier Saviola were the two that
Saviola, what a footballer.
Oh man, and he made it to Barcelona, and he was River Plate is where they used to sign him from in that game. And
fantastic.
Then he signed for Barcelona. And I remember saying to my mates, watch him. Tell you now, like, watch it. And he, never quite made the impact I claimed. As far as I was concerned, he was going to revolutionise Barcelona. Like, do you know what I mean?
Still a fantastic player.
Unbelievable player. But like, and that's the thing. I feel like people kind of miss out on these things now. Because one of the things that I loved about that game was you discover players. And then when you heard about them out in the real world, it's something in your head go, oh, that's That's my fucking, you know what I mean? And now everyone's just, because you can watch any fucking football in any country in the world at the click of a button, and it's kind of, it's great, but at the same time, it's a little bit of magic lost for me. Like,
but I think that goes back to, you know, Graham, and I know both of you were big fans of the wrestling, like going back many years. And it's that thing of Football Manager helped to build a narrative around certain players, right? It helped to make certain players household names like Bojan that maybe wouldn't have been otherwise, you know? And
very true.
Again, if we go back to where we started the conversation, make me care, right? I'm not watching sport for anything other than I want to feel a part of this. I want to know who I want to win and who I want to lose. Make me invested in what it is you're doing, you know, because it is the great escape. There's a reason there's 162 baseball games in an American season. It's because life for the most Americans is shite, right? And they need that bit of escapism. There's a reason why people wanted to see Muhammad Ali box. There's a reason why they want to see Conor McGregor or John Jones fight. There's a reason why they want to see the NBA finals between the Celtics and the Warriors, right? It's not enough just to be good at what you do or to be even the best at what you do. But we've come off this great generation where we've had that argument about Messi and Ronaldo, about Gerrard and Lampard. Ibrahimovic has been in there. There's been Lewandowski is in there in later years. Mbappe there now, you know. But we need that. We need these great narratives. We need to be made to care about them. And the more these people reflect ourselves in the way that Bojan's family fled the war in Yugoslavia in the mid-90s. And if you sit him down, he'll tell you the stories about it, you know. And like the idea of coming to a different country and being called a cigarette smuggler because, you know, you've got black hair and, you know, everybody over here was blonde and being made to feel excluded and feeling that you had to speak better Swedish than everybody else in the whole country just to be accepted, and knowing that he never would be. And that's the other side of Swedengate, Danny. It's this thing of no matter how long we live here, we'll never really be part of it. And that's why so many people in the Irish community, in the Somali community, in the Kurdish community here, we end up making our own thing because we're never going to be fully accepted into that, you know. But again, sport plays a great role in bringing all those things together, you know, in the Kurdish teams. Yeah,
like, what about the Swedish Football League? There's no, like we've seen just this afternoon, Alan Pardew has walked away from CSK Sofia in Bulgaria because his assistant and some of his players were racially abused, and him and his assistant have walked away. Like in Sweden, domestically, like, you know, culturally, there seems to be, well, on the lead up to elections and stuff like that, there seems to be a bit of racial tension. What is it like in the terraces of football matches?
Well, you know, I've been there myself. I've had a fella by the collar one time at a game between Djurgården and Örebro, and there was a guy called Abgar Barsum playing. He went on to play. He had a decent enough career at Herenveen in Holland, right? But he misplaced a pass. He was playing for Djurgården, and one of Djurgården's own fans stood up and abused him, right? And Abgar would be of Syrian he's actually of Assyrian extraction. So they're like Assyrians and Syrians are sort of slightly different. So he would be an Assyrian Christian. So and this guy stands up and said, "What the fuck are you doing, you pizza baker?" Because there'll be a lot of pizza place shops will be owned by Assyrian people. I worked in one of them myself when I moved over here, lads. And I turned around and I fucking grabbed it and said, "What's wrong with baking fucking pizza?" You know? And the man got the fright of his life because nobody else around him was going to say anything. But that was back in the time when I might have a few beers before I went to a game as a fan and sat down, you know? I was leaving him in no doubt that I didn't want to hear any more about this again. There has been times when Zlatan has been abused. Like, it is one of those things, but thankfully it has sort of disappeared now that, you know, we're now into a generation.
Zlatan abused for what?
You see, like people from the Balkans, like Bojan would have been called a cigarette smuggler. They would be called gypsies. They would be called all sorts of things. And of course, that happened to Zlatan in Italy as well. You know, you'll see the word, you know, used. I'm not going to use the word on this podcast because plenty of Eastern European listeners will recognize it, you know. But it's just one of those terms would be used, and it's an easy one, you know, like if El Bouzedi misses a cross, you thick Irish bastard, you know. Now, I've never heard that, but that's the kind of thing that you might expect people to say, you know. It's thankfully disappeared, and especially at AIK where Zach plays, it's along the blue line of the underground here. And the blue line, it's funny, it actually starts in at the Royal Palace where the King lives, and it passes through where I live and finishes out sort of in the immigrant suburbs. And I see that as very sort of symbolic of the modern Sweden, of the multicultural thing, a bit like Stephen Kenny's team that we were talking about earlier on there. And there it was one of the first places to disappear because all of a sudden the lads from the stations around here and from the pitches around here started to play for that team. Bojan among them. He won the Swedish championship with them in 2009, I think it was. And he came from the football pitches around here, you know. So
what do you make of the Alan Pardew thing, Phil?
I think it's the only way to go. I think that there has to be, you know, you can take the knee all you want, but eventually, you know, you have to judge people by their actions. And Alan Pardew in this situation, I've heard things about him from people who worked at Newcastle that he wasn't, you know, the nicest character, that kind of thing. But, you know, I'll tell you, he flew up in my estimation today all of a sudden when you decide, okay, I'm not having this, I'm walking away from it. And the players, it just can't be allowed. No more than can be allowed in the League of Ireland or in the Republic of Ireland or in Northern Ireland or anywhere else like that. We have to draw a line under, because there has to be social consequences for homophobia, for transphobia, for racism, for misogyny. We can't say to people that it's okay to sit in polite company and say these things and do these things. It just can't. We have to, mark these things and say, no, I don't want to be in the same gang as you. I don't want to be in the same terrace as you. I don't want to be in the same place as you. I don't want to have anything to do with you, because this is not who I believe that we should be. And it is sort of self-selecting that, if we act the way I acted that day, I probably scared another few people when I grabbed your man by the collar at that game that day. But I absolutely wanted to send that message, lads, that nobody around here was going to say this. I was only a year or two removed from at my own wedding, Dan, right? This Syrian family that I worked for came to my wedding, and they didn't know. The only Irish person they'd ever hung out with was me. But they went to the bar, and they did the thing that they do at their own weddings. If you go to a Syrian wedding, they'll put a bottle of whiskey and a bottle of vodka on the table. And as soon as that's empty, they'll be back with another one and another one and another one until everybody falls out of the kip, right?
None of that on Sunday, Dan.
Don't do that because that was the mistake they made. They did that with the Irish people and with the Swedes, right? And the lads didn't care. Now, as it turned out, the place we held the wedding in, it must be the cheapest place for booze and all of Sweden. But they did that because they were such generous, decent people. Now, how can I go to a game 6 months or a year later and hear these people and their reputation being abused? And so I can't have it. In the same way that I'm sure I used to play football against Kwame Ampadu, who's Nathan Ampadu's father, or Ethan Ampadu's father. Ethan, who played for, I think he played for Sheffield United now, but he was at Chelsea for a while there, and he's declared for Wales. His father's from the North Inner City, and the abuse he used to get, lads, when we played. If you played a lot of Gaelic football actually for O'Connell's, and that was mostly where I played against him, and the abuse he used to get, people firing the N-word at him in his own fucking team, right? But back there, it's not like we didn't know it was wrong, but we never fucking spoke up about it. I remember thinking, what the fuck is this? Nobody else gets spoken to like this. And it's no surprise to me that his son went and played for Wales. Why the fuck would he play for Ireland after the abuse his father got before he went to Arsenal as a trainee, So those things, I do think that there has to be a social consequence somewhere for it.
Absolutely. And I think this is the thing as well, when people say keep politics out of sport and all that, I completely fucking disagree. I think sport is a great platform to do it. And like I said, it can't be that mealy-mouthed stuff either. And don't get me wrong, the taking the knee thing to sit and just for the conversations it caused, it's worthwhile. But at a certain point, it runs out of steam because it becomes just, they're doing that again kind of thing. And you look at it and, and not to try and go back to basketball conversation again, but you go back to when the teams were in the bubble during the pandemic and whatever, and playoffs, and the Bucks refusing to play after George Floyd was murdered. The Bucks saying, we're not playing right now. This isn't right. More needs to be done kind of thing. Then you look at Formula One, and Sebastian Vettel has a great reputation for being a nice guy and for standing up for causes and all that kind of stuff. But equally, I'm kind of like, but he's still getting in and racing in Saudi Arabia. He's still getting in and racing in Qatar and all these places that, it's brilliant that he puts, it's June 1st as we're recording this, it's Pride Month, and it's brilliant to see him in Saudi Arabia, putting the pride flag on his helmet and that kind of thing, and saying, I'm fucking sticking two fingers up to the regime here in a way. But at the same time, he's a 4-time world champion. If he just took a stand and said, I'm not racing in Saudi Arabia, it would,
Well, we're seeing the way you're saying there about politics and football, and people like UEFA and stuff, they will, UEFA, I believe in the last 12 months have fined Dundalk Football Club and Celtic Football Club for having Palestinian flags in the crowd. Now, recently, in the last 2 or 3 months, a lot of UEFA affiliated stadiums have now Ukrainian flags hanging out in solidarity. So I have a problem with where's the consistency there? Will Celtic and Dundalk Football Club get their money back for their fines? Because the point that they were fined was that, keep politics out of football. Ukrainian flags are everywhere. Now, there's no difference to me and the wider community as to what's happening, what Israel apartheid state are doing and have been doing for years in Palestine, and the invasion of Ukraine by Russia. So they can't pick and choose the events you know, and I fully agree what the Bucks did in America. I fully agree what Steve Kerr did last week at the press conference. He didn't want to talk about
absolutely,
basketball. That was very moving, and that was very sincere. You know, I don't buy this keep politics out of football. When something happens in society, if something happened tragically this evening, damn right. If an audience of worldwide people are watching a football match, a Nations League match, a World Cup qualifier, whatever it may be, that's the opportunity to do it.
But ultimately, and you see, we're talking just it's at scale here, isn't it? Because Phil, your example of you turning around and grabbing that fella that said fucking pizza baker or whatever it was, you know what I mean? At scale, that's you saying, I will not accept this injustice. I will not accept this, and I'm going to make sure people know. You ramp that up to the level of the Milwaukee Bucks. You ramp that up to the level of Steve Kerr, to the Celtic Football Club, that kind of thing. You need that. You need it to go from the ground up and from the top down. It has to be across the board, because without it, these conversations and these injustices, you know, you get a little bit of a kind of like, oh, we fucking leave that alone over there. It's not for us.
See what happens as well. And see what happens as well, though. And just to clarify about my comments about the Ukrainian flag, that should have happened. I'm agreeing with that.
No, yeah, you're saying you're fully in support of it, but equally you're saying it should be perfectly fine for the Palestinian to flag just as high as the Ukrainian flag is being flown.
Absolutely. You can't just pick and choose atrocities. You know, it's just the lack of consistency with particularly UEFA on societal issues.
One of the things that happens as soon as you bring politics into anything, one of the things that happens is you can always find a situation of hypocrisy, right? Where, oh, you allow this, but you don't allow that, you know? So it becomes quite reductive. And it's actually bitterly ironic to see UEFA, you know, changing things around, kicking Russia out of the European Championships, et cetera, when Gazprom, you know, which is basically, you know, a tool of the Russian state that was used to rob the Russian people, went and sponsored the Champions League for 20 years and turned football into this, you know, huge behemoth that it has become. You know, but on another, whereas it's brilliant to see Steve Kerr, who was, you know, Steve Kerr is what I want America to be. Like, he personifies what I want America to be. LeBron James wearing the I Can't Breathe t-shirt that he had printed up. What was that man's name? Eric, who was choked to death for selling cigarettes in New York or whatever by cops there. I can't remember the poor chap's surname. That's who I want America to be. But there's always going to be that, you know, like a moral equivalence. So there's always going to be a difficulty in saying that, because the next thing you'll find that somebody who says something that we disagree with is going to do the same thing. You know, you will get that thing, you know, you get homophobes saying, oh, you know, we believe that marriage should be between a woman and a man, and then a banner comes out and that kind of thing. So it's an absolute minefield. And the other thing is that Vettel's doing good things. I've talked to a few people now. I'm basically going to the World Cup in Qatar, lads, and I've had a serious wrestle with myself over whether I should do this or not. Some people I know are not going. They don't want to, you know, and I don't know yet if I'm going to be able to do the kind of journalism I want to do.
Yeah.
But before I made the decision whether or not to go, I've been about a year wrestling with this. And I remember speaking to a Sweden international, and she's gay. And I asked her, I said, I just want to ask you one question. I said, how do you feel about me going to cover a World Cup in a country that you can't go to? Because that's essentially what it comes down to, right? I have to be accountable to her. I have to be accountable to every gay person I know. I have to be accountable to every Nepalese migrant worker I know. Am I doing you a disservice by going there? Am I polishing the turd that is the Qatar World Cup 2022? Am I letting these people away with something? Or am I shining a light on something that needs to be done? And there's no guarantees, lads. I could get down there, and I've been in places that, you know, it's been impossible to do the works I want to do. Beijing was just one of them, and I'm not back long back. I was just going to
say there, yeah.
You know, it ended up being impossible, Graham, because the bubble that they put us in, like, we weren't allowed to speak to anybody. We weren't allowed to do anything, you know, and COVID was a good thing to hide behind, because it's, sorry, lads, we can't let you out and about, because, you know, and that wound up, from a sort of a hard news point of view, that wound up being a huge disappointment to me, not being able to talk to people or being able to see things, being able to report on things. I think it will be better in Qatar because it won't be as locked down. And I'll do my best to lose myself, you know, whitest man in the country as I'll be. But I'll do my best to lose myself and to find the people that I need to talk to. And there are ways and means of doing that on the ground that will be much easier to do it in Beijing. But the jury's out, you know.
Do you know the point I was making about the Ukraine flags?
Yeah.
Like, in that situation, I actually saw on Twitter football fans, you know, when what am I trying to articulate? Basically, football fans not having as much empathy for the Ukraine invasion because of UEFA's lack of like fine Dundalk and Celtic. Do you get me? They they're actually, UEFA's actions are actually losing support for the actual invasion itself, and that's stupid. That's ridiculous. That shouldn't happen.
It is, and yet you have to. We have to judge people by the sum of their actions, right? What Martin Luther King used to call the content of their character, not by the color of their skin. And when you look at international sport or the business of sport has chosen to walk hand in hand right now, as luck would have it, the next few Olympics are going to be in places like Paris, and they're going to be, the Winter Games are going to be in Milan, and the World Cup is going to be, the European Championships are going to be in Germany, that kind of thing. We've come off an absolutely terrible period of sports washing here. The 2014 Winter Olympics in Sochi, we've had a World Cup in soccer in Russia, we've had another Winter Olympics in Beijing, we've had like everything is going. We're going to Qatar now. We've had huge heavyweight boxing matches. Anthony Joshua against what's his name? Usyk is going to be in Jeddah, as far as I know. I heard that today. I don't know if it's confirmed yet, but like they've decided to go, and that's Eddie Hearn. A couple of weeks ago, I was delighted with Eddie Hearn for everything he was doing for women's boxing, and now he's going to turn the other cheek and go back to Saudi Arabia. So it's that thing of UEFA deserve every single bit of criticism they get, because they created the situation whereby these countries are allowed to launder their reputations, and they have to be responsible for the fact that football fans don't take this seriously, that there's actually less sympathy for the Ukrainian people and less sympathy for these expressions of sympathy for the Ukrainian people, because they have acted the way they did in the past. And that's why, again, if we circle back to where we started this conversation, it's not the how you do things, it's the why. That's what makes Stephen Kenny such a great leader for the Irish soccer team at the moment. It's what makes Louise Quinn such a great centre back in the Irish soccer team at the moment. It's what makes Katie Taylor such a great icon for the Irish people at the moment. She does things because they're within her power, because she wants to invest her time and her effort and her skill in what she's doing, and she's been richly rewarded for that, not least in the love of the Irish people. But these people are trying to negotiate through this and just trying to get more for the sake of having more. What sort of a goal is that? What sort of an ambition is that? What we really need is a sport that's inclusive. If I believed for one second that the World Cup in Qatar would guarantee a better situation for migrant workers, or for gay people, or for trans people, or for Christians, or for whoever else in that country, I would wholeheartedly back it. But I don't, and I can't, because I've seen it too often before. And the reason I'm going there is not because I want to go there, it's because I fucking don't want to go there, but I want to see what can be done. And I think that has to be the way. I think, if it comes to politics, you can't extract politics from sport, and you can't extract sport from politics. But we have to be conscious of that, and we have to work actively to use it in the right way, as you say about the Palestinian question, Greg, because you can be damn sure that Qatar and Saudi and Russia are doing that.
There's a great lesson to be learned in that, though, as well, Phil, in terms of, like, it is one thing an athlete going and whatever, an athlete using their platform through, but as a journalist, you have a duty, you have a responsibility in many ways. And there's a great lesson that can be learned from, what was his name, the Welsh journalist, Gareth Jones, who was the first journalist to report on the Holodomor in Ukraine when the Soviet Union was starving the people of Ukraine. And there were journalists who were in Russia, and they were saying all these things about how wonderful it is and how brilliant this, Soviet, there was fucking Pulitzer prizes being handed out to these guys who are reporting from Moscow and everything. And Jones is going to fucking Odessa, and he's going into South Ukraine. He's looking, he's saying, there's people starving everywhere. None of this is being reported. And his simple thing was, report what you see.
It's that simple.
Report what you see.
You don't even have to, like, people listen to me and, and they hear me speak, and people know where I stand on most matters at this stage, especially the lovely listeners of this wonderful podcast, right? But the fact of the matter is, when you separate, if you look at anything I write, which is straight news, there's a difference between an opinion column that I might write, and which I write very, very few of, and the straight news that is 90% of what I write. And I challenge anybody to look at what I write about any of these stories. I'm going to be interviewing Kurds about Sweden joining NATO tomorrow and what they might be sacrificed down there. And I don't think anybody from reading an isolated text will be able to tell where I personally stand on the issue, because that's not my job. Nobody gives a fuck about my opinion. My job is to report what they say and what's in the public domain, right? And that's the thing that we often fail to do. That's why I want to go. I don't want the migrant workers in Qatar to tell me their stories. I want them to tell their stories.
Yeah.
I don't intend to filter that in any way other than by the principles of journalism that you use to present these things in a fashion that turns them into news, right? What I think of that, what I think of, migrant workers' rights, or what I think of, the situation for gay people there, the risks that they take, the things that could happen to them if they're found. That's, my opinion, is a fucking no interest to anybody, and that's really where our job comes into it. And that's what makes it, and it sounds very fucking highfalutin, but that's what actually makes it a sacred profession, because, it is the first draft of history. It is as close as we're going to get to the unvarnished truth if it's done right. But if you go there thinking, and like I say, I don't know what I'm going to find when I get there. I have no preconceived notions whatsoever. There's been so many situations I've arrived in, and it's been, like Gareth Jones, completely different to what I expected. But the job is to go there. I'd be extremely anti-war, but if I have to go and cover it, I still have to go. And that's the way I feel about this World Cup,
Absolutely, Phil. And then look, we'll take a slightly different direction because I'm conscious of time as well, and we want to let you go because it gets dark in Sweden a lot quicker than it gets dark in Ireland. You guys don't get that grand stretch.
It's the other way around here. It doesn't get dark at all in the summer here.
Are you serious?
Yeah, so like it's now, we're now, what are we, the first week of June. So in 3 weeks' time, it won't get dark at all. So like it doesn't even get dark.
No way.
Oh, it's magic. Yeah. So
I thought you was, your fucking lines of latitude, longitude, and all. I thought you were the opposite. Yeah.
I'll send you a picture when we're done here, Danny. I'll WhatsApp you a picture from I was out in the country the other night at 11:15 at night, and a lovely deep blue evening sky, and that was as dark as it got. It was fantastic.
I want to talk to you very quickly. You were in Paris for the Champions League. What was your experience?
Well, but it was, oh God almighty. I feel so sorry.
I have Champions League fatigue.
I can imagine you do, Greg, but I'll make this very quick on you, right? So it was one of those things like, do you want to cover the Champions League? I said, yeah, sure, why not? So I wandered down there. So when I saw what happened to the Liverpool supporters, I kind of took to Twitter to say, okay, like I was there, like at the ground in the same situation as many of these people. And I explain what I mean by that. So every time you go to cover a big game, especially the Euros or the Champions League, or you apply for the accreditation in advance. So there had been a mix-up with my application and it hadn't been done. So I went to the accreditation center a little over 3 hours before the game, and it was chaos. The same thing. Nobody knew why it wouldn't work and why it could be done, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I spent 3 hours waiting outside the accreditation center at one of the corners of the stadium, seeing what was going on with the Real Madrid fans, right? And there were problems at that end of the ground as well, but they weren't as bad as they were on the other side of the stadium. But what then transpired was that I ended up watching the game because, and not only that, but one of the guys I was supposed to be working with didn't turn up, right? So there was, all they had to do was change the name of the accreditation. Bob's your uncle, Phil's in there, Champions League final, here we go. I ended up watching the game in my hotel room in Montparnasse, just south of the Eiffel Tower, after traveling from Stockholm to Brussels and then a train from Brussels to Paris, and then stand there for 3 hours, and some jobs weren't gone. It's not my fault. And that was the end of that. And then I started to get the reports because, like, as I was leaving there, right, the Stade de France, I don't know if you've ever been there, lads, but it's actually it's a horrible place, right? Not the place itself. Saint-Denis is fantastic. Some great restaurants, some great people living around there. But the stadium shouldn't be there. It's just garbage. Trying to get there is just fucking awful, right? So you come out of the tube station and basically you're into this sort of bottleneck straight away, made worse by the police on occasion. And I didn't realize, because I went back around just outside the police cordon. And at the time, people were talking about them using tear gas. I can smell tear gas miles off. I was tear gas for the first time in 2012 and several times since. Love it. It always means there's a few bob to be made. It's a good story to be told, right? Couldn't smell it. And I'm getting calls going, could you smell tear gas? I'm going, no, there's nothing like that. They were using pepper spray, but people were calling it tear gas. So I didn't actually see the worst of what was happening to Liverpool supporters. I saw the queues, all right, that were delaying the game. But I went back down into the underground and I went back to the hotel room. But after that then, lads, the following morning when I got up and I started to see the injuries that people had and the stories that were being told, and basically we only barely missed another Hillsborough the other night, right? And a man told me that he had survived Hillsborough and he was stuck at the front, banged against the fence with a ticket that he got from the club that wouldn't scan. And he passed out. He collapsed on the ground, right? And he thought that's it. He thought, that's his card marked. He thought he was dead. And the stewards came and they took him inside, and then he got a chance to explain what was happening. And he was pointing to the people behind going, they're all the same. That was where a friend of Andy Robertson, the Liverpool fullback, was standing there with a ticket as well. And I sat with him for an hour and talked about it. And the man was clearly traumatized. So you go back all those years to the 1980s and when Hillsborough happened, 97 people losing their lives, and all the Liverpool, and to blame those fans the way that the French Interior Minister has done and the police have done and UEFA have done, is an absolute disgrace. So I just hope that, I mean, I do now expect several Christmas cards and perhaps a selection box from Paul Howard after this particular conversation. But the way they were treated, and unfortunately, that is the first draft of history. It doesn't matter that what the Sun wrote after Hillsborough about people going through the pockets of the dead and pissing on it. It doesn't matter that never happened. This will always be attached to them. There's always Everton fans and City fans and Arsenal fans who want to attach that to them and go, oh, look at the Liverpool fans jumping over the fence trying to get in. They weren't jumping over the fence to get in without paying, lads. They had tickets. They were jumping over the fence to get in because they didn't want to fucking die crushed against a fence like all those people did 40 years ago, So to see this happening in this way, and to see Rob Harris for the Associated Press did some great stuff. You look at his Twitter timeline.
Yeah.
Miguel Delaney has done some very good stuff. The Athletic have done some very good stuff. But unfortunately, it's going to be lost. And now UEFA are going to do it. But I just don't know. It's just a disgrace that this could ever be about the Liverpool supporters and not about the utter failure of the French police and the French authorities and UEFA to actually run a game for 60,000 people properly.
Is there anything in the defense? I've heard a couple of people say kind of like, this is what happens when the game is moved to such short notice due to the final meant to be in, but St. Petersburg was meant to be in, and then so essentially they've been caught on the hop and we're trying to do the best they could. But as you said, ineptitude and failure all over this.
Like, if you can't stage the game safely, you can't stage the game, right?
Yeah.
These people they're not fans to me, they're customers. They're paying up to €500 and they can't even get into the ground in time for the start of the game, right? I was there 3 hours before kickoff, lads, and I saw this coming. I saw those two police vans that were parked there. The people were being sort of forced through. They were checking the bags and everything. Now, I have the advantage of being able to wave a press card and I can usually get in at the side, but I could see what was about to happen. It came as no surprise whatsoever to me, right? If you can't arrange the game safely, then don't arrange the game. Find somebody else who can do it. The other huge problem was the lack of communication, right? There's billboards everywhere. There's big LED screens outside the stadium. Put up on that. Look at, lads, leave some space for the people at the front. There's problems with the turnstiles. Do something like that. Instead of just going and spraying people with pepper spray at the front to try and get back and never fucking talking to them. You can't, if you go to any major championships in England are playing, you'll actually see bobbies with the fucking ridiculous hats that British cops wear, right? You'll see them on the streets because they're there to communicate with the fans. They're there to talk to them. They're there to explain how and why things are being policed the way they are, right? There was none of that on Saturday. The same thing, our good friends from Madrid and Spain maybe might not be the best of the English speakers in this world, right? There was nobody there to communicate with them, So the whole thing fell apart on communication. And then, unfortunately, the Paris police, French police in general, but Paris police in particular, are mad for swinging the L baton the first chance they get, right? It's not the first time I've seen it in France in a football game, and it won't be the last.
They take no shit. They
certainly don't,
fucking shit.
And I wouldn't mind, Dan. There has been situations I've seen Manchester United fans in France, who I'm never going to say that a fella deserves a beating because when they start fucking, there was fellas misbehaving. I've seen Chelsea fans in Copenhagen, the same thing, right? The Liverpool fans that I saw were giving their seats to female Real Madrid fans on the metro, right? There was banter, there was crack, there was swapping scarves, there was I hope for a good game, they made the best team win. That's all I saw. I literally didn't see a dig thrown. I did see a lot of people who were around the edges. You'll often sometimes get this at Crow Park as well. There'll be fellas knocking around the place, maybe trying to dip a pocket, trying to nick an iPhone, that kind of thing. There's a little bit of that. Wasn't Liverpool fans. They were just there, innocent people trying to enjoy their day out. And again, it's just like I want to ram home that point that nobody deserves to be put in that position, especially not a club and a city that has been as traumatized by the likes of Heysel and by the likes of Hillsborough. It's a shame to me because, they really did behave. I'm frankly surprised that there wasn't a riot. If you're standing there after paying 400 or 500 quid for a Champions League ticket and you hear the guys kicking off inside and you can't get in, and many of those people had to turn and go home in the Gare du Nord, the central train station in Paris, the following day. I met any amount of people who said, did you get into the game? No. So I actually didn't feel so bad that my accreditation got fucked up and I wound up watching in the hotel room because I wasn't the only one that was, UEFA's incompetence did us in.
There was hardship as well for those who did get into the stadium because God bless them, they got in and into sit through Camilla Cabello singing 3 songs. And that was fucking terrible.
I mean, so who bought a ticket for
who that is?
Oh my God, it was fucking odd. Why are they doing that at sporting events now where they insist on making you sit through whatever fucking flavor of the month pop music is put in front of us now. Like,
I will give the Ballon d'Or, right, the prize that goes to the greatest footballer in Europe, to a non-footballer. The first person who finds the plug for the PA and pulls the fucking thing out before any big international game or club match, that goes to them, because I just hate it. And especially with Liverpool fans and Real Madrid fans, when they're singing Hala Madrid and Liverpool fans are singing You'll Never Walk Alone, let them at it. They create such a brilliant atmosphere.
Exactly.
I was at a game in 2016, France against Romania, the opening game of the 2016 European Championships, and David Guetta was, this DJ lad was there. It's a fella stand there twiddling knobs in the middle of the pitch, lads. So I find it very hard to get excited, And yes, he's giving it fucking loads of this, and all the football fans are standing there and go, "Would you ever fuck off?"
I don't get. I think, and it's the same. Like, one of the criticisms I've had of Leinster rugby over the last while, and it can definitely contribute to me not being too much of a hurry to renew a season ticket, is this thing of trying to create an atmosphere where they have piped stuff coming in, they've piped fucking music stuff coming in, expecting the crowd to chant along to that. Or for a while they had these, not a mariachi band, I don't even know how to fucking describe it, but it was like a really shit mariachi band at the back of the stand playing. It was like, do you know when England go to like a fucking World Cup or whatever?
Oh, that brass band.
It was like that, but even fucking worse. And they were playing fucking Molly Malone, and which baffles me. It baffles me that fucking Leinster fans sing. It's the most more depressing fucking song possible, and these fuckers are singing it. And this brass band shithouse mariachi thing is, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, I've paid 60 quid to sit in this fucking stadium and listen to this.
And to be treated like a child. It's like a children's birthday party.
Worse, man. I'd rather at least a children's birthday party, someone's going to fall over, cry, and I get to laugh at it. Do you know what I mean?
But you know what Rovers used to do when we scored? They put music on when that scorer scored. And you're kind of like, no, let the fans react. Let the fans sing that player's song. Let the fans sing a song. Don't put music on. I'm pretty sure they stopped that.
Well, that's the thing. The rumble in the jungle. Muhammad Ali and George Foreman didn't need anybody. They just needed somebody to say, "Oh, here's the two lads. Now he weighed in. So this way, he weighed in that way. Let's get it on." That was it, right? Yeah. And this turning sport into entertainment, I think it does it a disservice, right? I think I'm all for making much better stadiums in the League of Ireland and around the world. I'm all for a safe fan experience, right? But I don't like spoon feeding, right? If I go to a baseball, like I love to get into New York. If I have the privilege of working in New York, as I have done on many occasions, I love to get in on a Tuesday and to go up to Yankee Stadium. Don't even like the Yankees, right? But I go up there and I'll buy the cheapest ticket I can get, and I'll sit down there and I'll respect the game. I'll try to get into who's pitching, who's doing what, who's doing that. I don't know a whole lot about baseball, but I have to move towards the game. I'm not going to sit there with the biggest a bucket of nachos the size of my own head, have a snack and fuck off after the seventh innings. You have to respect the sport. It has to be at the sport. It has to be at the gladiators, the warriors at the end of the day. And if you need 2 Unlimited being played in every fucking time out for that, you're at the wrong thing. You should be at a child's birthday party in Leo's Playland or whatever, rather than a sporting event. So we need to sort of, as Rovers hopefully are doing, Graham, supporters and fans need to be taking that back just a little bit. Like the singing section at the Republic of Ireland games is brilliant. That whole idea. I just wish the whole stadium was a singing section, and maybe we'll have that in time. And the same thing with Leinster Rugby. Leinster Rugby has like a very strong culture, right? But it doesn't need all this artificial shit. Like, what's wrong with silence in the stadium? What's wrong with letting people cheer and shout and sing as they see fit? If you go to a game in Italy or if you go to a game in Spain, and that's part of the ebb and flow of it. Whereas in the NBA, it drives me bananas. Have you seen that woman, Dan? If you stay up late and watch a game, Mero, it's absolutely fantastic. There's a woman who gets up on the tallest unicycle you've ever seen, right? And her gig is that she has about a dozen Tupperware plastic bowls that she puts on her feet and then flicks them up onto her head, smiling as if she's amazed that she managed to pull this off. And she does it for a good 6 or 7 minutes at halftime. And that's her gig. She goes around NBA arenas doing this. And for the life of me, I can't work out why that person exists at all.
But the only time me and Danny enjoyed it, and it's different than combat sports, but we enjoyed Sinead O'Connor with Connor that time.
That's
different because it's an entrance music and it's gonna happen anyway. It's a walkout music.
Tyson Fury last time was just too much. It just took Jesus the walkout. I mean, I swear to God, he walked from fucking whatever the Emirates to Wembley the amount of time it took him, and then he sat in the throne in the middle of it. There's always a thing, your mate in ABBA would always say.
Remember the Wilder What's his first name?
Deontay Wilder.
Deontay Wilder.
With the big suit.
Remember he had the 25 kilo fucking thing on his neck?
And he was so worn out that he got battered when he got out of the ring.
He used that as an excuse for why he lost in, yeah.
I tell you, it's about the most believable thing because he couldn't box his way out of a paper bag, that lad, you know? but just do it. Like, when you think of that thing, like, you're woman doing 3 songs, do one and fuck off. Nobody cares, you know. Shakira doing that song, I can't remember, for the World Cup in South Africa. Come in, do it, and get out.
Get the fuck out.
It's like George Murphy, the lovely George Murphy, who used to be on Eurostar and Dudley Carney, from Dudley Carney. Just come in, do Raglan Road, and off you go, George. Brilliant. You know, that's superb. But
That's
don't do this thing, you know. Again, we need to get back to, you know, what sport is all about. Sport is all about watching somebody doing something we couldn't even imagine ourselves. And fucking singing 3 songs before the Champions League, I couldn't imagine that, but that's for a different reason.
I couldn't give a shite about the halftime stuff. Whatever. If you want to put something on a halftime, put something on a halftime. Couldn't give a flying fuck. That's
real
that.
Leinster rugby, Mero, isn't it? Because he's at the bar getting the high nose in, you know.
Don't you dare. Don't you. There are no sticks of dynamite being bought when I'm at a match, right? Fuck off. No, but I just I tell Lloyd, the Super Bowl halftime thing drives me mad because that's a whole nother fucking extreme, and it becomes more. There's more chat about the halftime show than there is about. Now, I'm not an American football fan, but at the same time, I couldn't give a shit if Eminem and Dre were there and they brought out fucking. They could bring back Elvis, and I wouldn't give a shit. I'm just like, it's, you know what I mean? Like, by all means, put on your little show at halftime, but don't make the event about that.
Unless it's Bruce.
That's a different story altogether. And that was probably the greatest halftime show in the history of halftime shows, to be fair to him.
Remember when we were saying about politics and sport, but there's always a little element of hypocrisy. Danny just provided us with a perfect example.
Exactly.
There. Don't do anything except the things I like. Thanks.
Exactly. That's Danny all over.
Listen, if Bruce Springsteen wants to sing before the Champions League, shut the fuck up and let him, right?
Exactly.
If Bruce Springsteen wants to sing when an overplayer score, shut the fuck up and let him, right?
Phil, what have you got coming up on your pod?
God almighty. I don't know if I can't even remember the last time I was talking to you lads, but I started this Irish and Sweden pod, right?
Yeah, and you did indeed.
And it struck me the other day. I was interviewing 2 people, right? One was a girl called Miranda Murray Eriksson, who's currently in Ballybuffet. In Ballyshannon for the Rory Gallagher Festival, right? An amazing Swedish folk singer. I think she's about 26, 27. But she heard Rory Gallagher during the pandemic. Her mother played a bit of her for her. Her mother was a big Rory fan. And she started to translate Rory's music into Swedish, his songs into Swedish. And we just got in touch with her. And now she's on her way to Ballyshannon. She's going to be up there. She might sing 1 or 2 of those tunes up there. And then there was an artist called Laura Fitzgerald who she's from Ring, very, very particular about that, lives in Tralee. And she was over here doing an exhibition. And it struck me the other day that this podcast, it might be sort of about the Irish experience in Sweden, but it's actually for the Irish kind of everywhere, right? So I'm going to do a podcast eventually for the global Irish community because I do think that there's 40 million people around there. It might actually be easier to find a fucking sponsor who might be prepared to pay for it, you know? But, you know, this thing of, you know, finding the Younger Man in Stockholm podcast is not coming out as regularly because it's putting so much work into this Irish and Sweden thing. And it's not like it makes a huge amount of money. But you know the way when you're hitting an idea, as you guys did with this award-winning podcast, and not to mention Dan's award-winning TV career as well.
Thank you, Phil.
Yeah. Far too humble to mention yourself.
Acknowledge me. Acknowledge me.
On this, the day of Danny's wedding, you know. But to find something like that actually works for people. There's about 3,500 Irish people here. Lads working on building sites and people teaching and researchers and that. So it's a small market, but it means something to them, and therefore it means something to me as well to talk to them every week, you know. And I found it there's very seldom when you do what we do, when you create content, when you're a journalist or a writer or a content creator, you know, very seldom do you sort of do something and all of a sudden you find yourself moving up a level. And I find that this podcast has moved my sort of audio skills up a level. And I started doing fucking local radio in 1994, probably before Mero was born nearly, you know. I was on North Dublin Community Radio there in Cabra, you know. So when you find something like that and it gives you back the joy of doing these things. And again, I've never done any of these things for money. I don't fucking care about money. I'm lucky enough to have a few bob, you know, from doing what I do. But that's not what it's about. It's about this connection. It's about connecting with people like ourselves, people like Pete. It's about connecting with the listener. And I really hope that people feel when the three of us are having this conversation, that the person who has their headphones on now is listening to this and that they feel part of it, as if they were sitting across the table from us in a pub with a sore throat and just not able to contribute. But they, you know, they feel that we try to include them. We try to give a different perspective, or to, you know, to include their perspective in the things that we're saying, because that's what great audio is about. It's what great podcasting about. It's what great community is about. It's trying to make sure that everybody feels included. And these podcasts are reminding me of that. So that's what I'm going to be sort of concentrating on. I'm going to be off to the Women's Euros on the 3rd of July. I have another fantastic job. It's unbelievable how lucky I get when it comes to these things. I'll be with the Norwegian girls again at the Women's Euros. Oda Hegerberg, the best forward in the world, is back. Just scored in the Champions League final. She was almost 5 years out of the national team because she fell out with them. 18 months out with a knee injury. Absolutely brilliant footballer. And I was only talking to two of the players, was it this morning or yesterday morning? And just so looking forward to that because women's football is now on the rise. I've been pontificating about that for a long time. So that's pretty much all of July, So actually, we'll see where it takes us. And then, of course, I'm due another appearance on the What's the Story pod, the award-winning podcast, in about September or so.
This is it. Yeah, that's true. Your calendar. Yeah, I mean,
that's fair enough.
Look, won't argue, Phil.
Can I just ask you a quick question, Phil, before you go? Because I always find you're great at these things. In terms, I didn't pay attention to any of the celebrity trials. The Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial. Look, I was in and out. I didn't really care about it.
This has gone a completely different fucking direction. Okay.
I know, but I just want, I know it's it is a serious topic. And I just briefly, Phil, the Johnny Depp Amber Heard thing, right? I personally, and I'm not an expert in that trial. What I saw of it, I felt that there was a pair of them in it. It's just breaking news that Johnny Depp has won the case. Do you think the glorification of Johnny Depp throughout that trial will hamper women from coming forward in domestic abuse cases?
I think every time a woman loses a case like that, it does. Every time a woman speaks up about rape, about sexual abuse, about physical violence, and the police don't do anything, it feeds into the narrative of, why didn't you just tell the police, well, this is what happens when you do, right? Without getting into the specifics of their case had a really weird dynamic because like there was fellas on YouTube who were making videos about playing FIFA and all of a sudden they were giving their opinions on the case because the algorithms were created. There was such a huge interest in this case. If you go back to the O.J. Simpson trial, it was a similar thing. Why did that murder above every other murder capture the attention? Black man, white woman, a gay man also killed in that as well. And again, I don't mean to be glib. It just had everything, And this is a case where it had everything that we like, right? So I remember sitting at the top of a tower in a hotel in Helsinki about 20 years ago, arguing with a really good journalist friend of mine. I despise, gossip magazines and showbiz page and all that. I just hate it because I just don't see it as being used. And he was saying, yeah, but it's always been there. It's always been a part of media, part of journalism. That sort of salacious gossip, and people have made an awful lot of money out of it, right? And this was the perfect poisonous cocktail because it allowed us to sit there and feel superior to two famous millionaires. Because as you say, Graham, the narrative that there's a pair of them in it was one thing, she was, the way I would describe her is an imperfect victim, right? And that unfortunately is what the defense always tries to do. Say if a man is accused of rape, they try to paint the victim as being imperfect. She was asking for it, Your Honor. She was wearing this, Your Honor. She behaved in this way, Your Honor, right? And just because somebody is a dick themselves doesn't mean that other people are entitled to be a dick to them, right? And I don't know if Johnny Depp, I'm sure he is. He has the good taste to listen to this podcast, But that's why I only say this for his libel lawyers, really. But is like when I read up on people who know things about domestic violence, right? Amber Heard, to all intents and purposes, acts and behaves and speaks in the way that somebody who has suffered domestic violence or survived domestic abuse acts, right? That's not to say that she's never done the same thing herself, right? I've both smacked people in my life and I've been smacked, right? I'm not a perfect individual, none of us are. But the way that this was done and the way that an awful lot of these things happen and the way that all of a sudden now these things become part of the discourse, like Johnny Depp apparently is up in court again in July for hitting a man, but nobody's heard about that despite the fact that there's this ongoing court case, right? So one of the most important things in media and journalism is when you see something like that, a case like that, and when you see the scale that it attains, is to ask two questions, right? Why this and why now? Why are we so... What is it about this case that we're so engaged in it, down to three fellas who love sport and would never turn on Sky News to watch a minute or Entertainment Tonight or whatever to watch a minute of this, and yet here we are talking about it. Why? Why is that happening? And why now? What has that got to say? I honestly believe that this feeds into sort of a greater thing. We see what's happening to the trans community at the moment, how people are being targeted, how everything that has anything to do with trans, especially trans people in sport, is making the front pages, regardless of what happens, right? Greta Thunberg, the environmental activist, is no longer there, right? There's a big protest in Stockholm tomorrow as we're speaking, and nobody's speaking about that. So why this, why now are always the questions that we have to ask. And the hard part of it is that this trial, or this, Johnny Depp suing Amber Heard in this way, it requires us to dig into the detail. There are no black and white answers. There is no one person is right and the other person is wrong. And most of us aren't prepared to do that. We like a binary. We like to sit down and watch a movie and know that the good guy or the good girl wins in the end. And that doesn't offer us this. And what it leads us to do then is to walk away saying, well, sure, they're all at it. Right? That's always the easiest thing to do. Football fans, Liverpool fans, actually, they're always like that. All football fans are like that. They don't deserve to be treated with dignity. And the moment you start to do that, the moment you start to decouple your intellectual capacity from what it is actually happening in the world, you're taking a stance. You're saying, I no longer care that certain things can be allowed to happen. And as Danny rightly points out, it says a very powerful signal that it's okay. You can get away with this. And that's why we can never allow ourselves to become desensitized to transphobia, to racism, to homophobia. We can't become desensitized to the homeless community in Ireland, to the traveling community in Ireland. And we are. Because we step over those people every day, lads. We step over people on the way to work. The fact that there's 10,000 people homeless in Ireland, maybe more than 3,000 of children, we just accept that now because we become desensitized to it. So every day we have to remind ourselves that nobody deserves this. Nobody in Amber Heard's situation deserves to be struck by a man. End of story, right? Nobody deserves to be homeless. No traveling person deserves to be skipped over their CV just because they don't live in a house in the way that the three of us do, right? And that's what this is saying to me. It's not the specifics of the case or that Johnny Depp is right and, she's an idiot and that kind of thing. It's not saying that to me at all. It's saying to me that we need to look at things in even greater detail, not try to simplify, not look for the good guy or the bad guy or the bad girl. It needs us to look at it and go, how can we make this better for everybody? It doesn't matter who's in the wrong and who's in the right. It doesn't matter what's in the past, but how can we move this forward for everybody? To me, it doesn't serve a great purpose. What's another few million to a millionaire? What's destroying a woman's reputation publicly? Can we not be the adults in the room? And that requires us as well to put away some of the bitterness that we have towards UEFA about the Palestinian flag, towards Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil for destroying the health service, for destroying the country. It requires us to park those things and say, look, maybe there can't be justice for everybody. Maybe we have to let certain things slide, Bloody Sunday, whatever. Maybe we can't get those people in the dock before they all die. But the question is, where do we go from here? When we've asked ourselves why this, why now, the next question is, where do we go from here? And these are pivotal times in a situation where Russia has invaded Ukraine, in a situation where Sweden and Finland are joining NATO, in a situation where trans people's rights, their right to exist, is being threatened. We need to ask ourselves, where do we go from here? What kind of an Ireland do we want? Do we want Stephen Kenny's multicultural Ireland where everybody gets a chance and everybody takes responsibility? Or do we just want to hoof the ball up in the stands and not think about it? And they are the things that we have to think about, both in the near future, but also in the medium to long term.
Lovely.
What a fucking way to finish.
What a way to finish. Phil, where are you on social media? Where can people follow you?
You can follow me at Philip O'Connor is on Twitter. You can follow the at Irish in Sweden pod on Instagram. You can follow at Philip Ablana on Instagram as well. I had TikTok and I've made sort of one post recently, and that's about it. So don't bother following me there.
It was on the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial, was it?
Actually, it wasn't. It was probably on Liverpool fans or something like that. I can't even remember. Lovely. So, Dan, if you want, I have a software program that can take those last 5 minutes, and that could be our best man speech. So it's no charge.
Amazing. That'd be perfect. That would absolutely be perfect.
Danny, I just want to close by saying, Daniel, I've known you for a few years now. I still remember the first time you just sent me an email and you offered me the opportunity to come in this podcast, and you were a little bit surprised I answered so fast and said yes. And you know what? It was one of the best things I ever did because I love the two of you, and I really want to wish yourself and Oksana and you, Graham, with the basketball team every success in what's coming in the near future and the medium term and the long term as well, because I know that you guys want to do what's best for us all.
Thanks, trying to, man, and thank you. And it's always a pleasure having you on this podcast. It's always great to hear what you're up to as well. You get to live out certain things that just sound like that sounds like great fun.
It's an easy night for me and Danny when we have you on.
And that is also very true.
The next invite on Zoom that I get, it's going to be just me. There'll be nobody else here.
Just like Phil, you know the drill, mate. Yeah. Click record.
Mero will be off in a tournament somewhere. Danny will do an intro and then just fuck off. Yeah. Like he'd be off on his honeymoon. Come back 2 weeks later. I'll be fucking
the next step is no Zoom links. The next step is if you're on these shores or anything like that, there's 4 microphones and Pizzi Carroll and a meeting of minds to come together at some point.
I think the world is ready for that now. If it's ready enough for Danny Murray being mature enough to get married, it's ready for me and PT in the one room going at it.
This is it. Yeah.
Danny is at Danjo Murray on Twitter and Instagram. I'm at American Mania on Twitter and Instagram.
He's reading this off the screen. I can't believe after 260
hole.
Yeah, I can see you doing it.
I wish I was. I'm trying to look at the Ukraine-Scotland match in the background. Ukraine are winning 2-0. Anyway, big month for me and Danny ahead. You can follow all our lives on social media with Danny getting hitched and me going over with Ireland. And that's it. Danny, anything else to say?
Just that the basketball will be live on YouTube, my wedding month. So
perfect.
Yeah.
You can follow us at WTS Pod. You can search WTS Pod on any podcast provider, Podcast Republic, Stitcher, Apple Podcast, Podbean, wherever.
It's like the fucking song that never ends.
Spotify, anywhere. I'm trying to be a Phil O'Connor monologue. Anywhere and everywhere you can get a podcast, you'll get us.
Song that
WTS Pod.
Danny, they're playing your song. Let's go.
Yeah. If this was the Oscars, the music would be hitting, man.
It is. Yeah, we will be back in sometime in July. Until next time, Danny.
Cheers.
Full hearts and blues.